Okay, we're going live now. Apparently my clock is 20 seconds slow. Anyway, it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. And once again, I'm talking to myself, but hopefully there'll be somebody that come along fairly soon. At any rate, this live hangout will be I'll set it to private immediately afterwards. It will be edited and put on my YouTube account, where it is, and then hopefully next month it will be added to the Internet Archive. Well, I've got a lot of ground to cover tonight. The grand conspiracy, but first of all, there are other matters, news matters as such. Cuba Gooding Jr., the case against him, he's only he groped a woman in a nightclub. And they've added a charge or two to that. It's to me, it seems the guy was drunk and he shoved a woman's breast rather than touch. I don't know. I've got. Well, do you think she would have? You think she would have complained to the police if he hadn't been a celebrity? No. Anyway, yeah. That will hopefully result in an acquittal, at least of a sexual offence. Me Too strikes again. Somebody from the anti-Trump network, a bloke called Matt Lauer, you may just have heard of. Let's play this, see what it says. Oh, the video's been removed. I wonder why. He was accused of sexually violating a co-worker. He issued a statement to the effect that the encounter was consensual. Matt Lauer denies false and salacious rape allegations, says the affair was consensual. Yeah, I mean, I find it very difficult to only sympathy for these guys. I don't believe this rubbish, but I mean, let me put it this way: the women, these women, they're not poor, oppressed housewives or innocent victims. That they're career women, and suddenly, years later, they reveal they what's the word? Disclose their abuse. No, I don't go along with that. It's a case here for the grooming gang cases. I mean, you've probably heard of these in the north of England, mostly in the north of England. This is the Daily Mirror. This was Telford abuse victim was raped by 500 men from 11, but cops chose to prosecute her. Give the name Jennifer, not her real name, of course. Exclusive. Let down by authorities after a 7-year ordeal, Jennifer tells the Sunday Mirror for the first time how it was she who was left with a criminal record. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I know if you're familiar with my writings and my experiences over, certainly since the early 1990s, you realise I'm no fan of the police. But I find it difficult to believe that. In fact, I find it impossible to believe that they would have allowed a girl of 11 to be, 11. I mean, no, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't believe that at all. Robbed of her childhood, degraded by hundreds of abusers, and betrayed by authorities. She ran to help. She was raped by over 500 men, so she kept count. She was gang raped off in her school uniform, trafficked and held at gunpoint. I mean, just 4 years until she was 19, she fell under control of a man who walked around like a piece of meat. Jennifer claimed police refused to intervene and repeatedly arrested her for prostitution. Despite her pleas that she was being exploited. Well, I mean, no, I mean, look, if a girl of 15 or 16 is arrested, well, prostitution isn't illegal to start with, but if a teenager is arrested in this country, if she's arrested for prostitution or some prostitution offence, the courts will take action. They will take action. If the police don't take action, social workers, the courts, they will do something. So this is still ended up in the dock. I was starved, so I had no money for court fines. I was terrified of going to jail. I was basically paying to be raped. Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, you can hear the world's smallest violin playing in the background, can't you? No, I mean, it's just hundreds of young girls raped, beaten, sold for sex, some even killed over 4 years. You know, this scandal was bad. You know, it was very bad. But a lot of these. Jennifer, now a mum in her 40s. She's a mum. Oh dear. I just think the guy who married her. He must be a catch. Hello, somebody there. Who is it? If you want to remain anonymous, fair enough. I just before we start the grand conspiracy, I'm just going over recent news stories. So that this one is absolutely outrageous. This is from the Times. Lawyer calls for juries in rape trials to be ditched, and the lawyer concerned is none other than Harriet Wistrich. When I read this, I've sent a letter to the Times and copied it to several parties. No response. Harriet Wistrich and her lover, Julie Bindel, are two man-hating lesbians who, and a lie, absolutely just outright liars, basically. Wistrich was behind the recent Sally Challen appeal. If you want to know just what a total cunt she is, her and Bindel, check out my dissertation, The Canonisation of Emma Humphreys. Just really outrageous that a woman like this is. Oh, Sonia White, hello. I recall you. So yes, I remember you. Yes. Well, welcome to the International False Rape Timeline. Just you and me at the moment, but hopefully there'll be another couple going. Thursday nights appear to be the optimum time for this. The most I've had is, I think, 7, which was probably about second or third hangout. Anyway, I'm going to cover the grand conspiracy tonight, which should be interesting. Right. The grand conspiracy. This is. I'm going to mention the lunatic fringe, which I haven't yet covered, which I will cover hopefully in a later hangout. And also, I won't be covering Operation U-Tree, not in depth, but I will be looking at the ludicrous VIP paedophile ring. Now, first, briefly, let's give some background to this. There are people out there, some of them have excellent credentials, who believe there is a massive worldwide conspiracy, a network that controls everything. And this includes breeding babies for sacrifice and satanic rituals, the organised rapes of young girls and just as often young boys, all manner of stuff. Unless you research this subject and heard these people talking, you don't realise how far off the planet they are. Believe me. I mean, what is really amazing and outrageous is that some of them actually get public funding. They run so-called charities and lobbying organisations that they get charitable donations and occasion donations from central government and local government. And some of the people behind the rape crisis network, overwhelmingly women, believe in this rubbish. Now, this is the grand conspiracy, a grand conspiracy. The grand conspiracy, as such, is that there's a centuries-old plan set in line by the Order of the Illuminati. Summer's gone here, by the way, so I'm sort of fairly well wrapped up. The Order of the Illuminati set in motion a plan to control the world, and this has been carried out to this day. Now, there are variations on this conspiracy. I mentioned one of them here. This is that King Solomon sat down with the elders of Zion in 929 BC to plot conquest of the universe, not just of the earth, but the universe. And this was to be done by sending the symbolic snake of Judaism to the world's great cities. They entered Greece in 49 BC, the Roman Augustus in about 69 BC, Madrid in 1552, Paris in 1790, London 1841, Berlin 1871, and St. Petersburg 1881. Since then, we can only speculate where it's gone, but Moscow, Berlin, Beijing. That if you're prepared to swallow that, you need to speak to David Icke, okay? Not me. Now, the Illuminati did exist. I've got a note or two here. I can find it. Yeah, the Illuminati did exist. It was founded May 1st, 1776, by Adam Weishaupt, who was professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt, Bavaria. Now, its goals were not. It's perceived as a sinister, anti-religious organisation. As a lifelong atheist, I've got no problem with that. But it wasn't. How can I put it? At the time, you had the Alliance of Throne and Altar. You had the church sort of ruling the roost, as it were. And a lot of things the church did were very bad. You ask Galileo. You had, in England, you had Henry VIII set up his own church so he could marry his second wife and be promptly murdered. But you had others sort of reforming, and up until that time, Catholics were in control. Then the Protestants took over. Then in 1605, you had the persecution of Catholics was so bad that you had the Gunpowder Plot, Guy Fawkes, Robert Catesby, and all that. The idea that religion was bad, or at least that the influence of religion should be curtailed, wasn't such a terrible wasn't such a terrible idea. Now, so the Illuminati did exist. There was no email in those days, so everything went by courier. In 1785, lightning struck one of its couriers, and some of its papers fell into the hands of Bavarian authorities, who promptly suppressed it. It was believed the Illuminati was destroyed or disbanded. Others believe it exists to this day, and some believe it has magical powers. Mainstream scholars ridicule anyone who believes in this so-called conspiracy theory. They call them conspiracy theorists, and often as anti-Semites, which is a well-known smear. There are a lot of Jews involved, especially in communism, but it isn't racial Jews, not Torah true Jews. There's a lot of rubbish peddled about this to this day. Not all of it by anti-Semites. A lot of it is just deliberately to ridicule people and getting too close to the truth. You can read up on Jekyll Island, the Jekyll Island conspirators, the Federal Reserve, the New World Order, and the deep state or shadow government, or what Dan Smoot called the invisible government. You can read up on elsewhere. But for our purposes, the theory goes something like this. People who are wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice have perverted desires and are able to indulge them by sexually defiling the young, trafficking women, and even committing murders for fun. Well, Not so wealthy people have perverted desires as well, and sometimes they carry them out. I discussed the truth about sex trafficking in an earlier hangout, but it's fair to point out the idea that there are evil, incredibly depraved men out there who do unspeakable things for young and not so young. This is not an absurd belief. We've seen this throughout history in women as well as men. The most notorious was Elizabeth Bathory, who became known as the Blood Countess because she was said to have bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. Until her arrest in 1609, 1610, she and her collaborators were said to have murdered literally hundreds of young girls. The sexual sadist Gilles de Rais from an earlier generation, he was said to have murdered perhaps up to 200 victims, mainly young boys. He was executed. Bathory was walled up in a castle. Gilles de Rais was executed in 1440. In our own day, we've seen all manner of serial killers. Just to mention Bittaker and Norris, Lawrence Bittaker was a highly intelligent man, but somehow became a small-time career criminal. When he was in prison in California, he met Roy Norris, who was a convicted rapist. I'm not sure if he was served a term for rape at that time, or some such offence. But while they were in prison, they came up with a plan to kidnap, rape, torture, and murder teenage girls. And when they got out, that's what they did. They had a van which they called Murder Mac, and they were caught after 5 because Bittaker insisted on making tapes of his victims screaming. I mean, you'll find this online. There were two other serial killer couples in California. That was Kenneth Bianchi and his cousin. Angela Bono. Bono died a while back in prison. There was actually an absolutely remarkable forced rape story related to Bianchi, which I'll put it on the timeline at some point. A woman who it's just totally beyond belief. You know, there's evil and twisted as some men are. There's some women who are just off the planet in their insanity. So no rational person denies that there are sadists out there, sexual sadists, yada yada yada. No, nobody denies it. Is there a vast global network involving politicians, state agents, and the wealthy who do these things? Well, you know, I have some sympathy to people who believe this, because we've seen the Rotherham scandal, which didn't involve powerful people, that was covered up. In America, you've had like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. You had the COINTELPRO case. If you've been following the deep state's war against Trump, the lies that have been told about Donald Trump, and the way they covered up for Hillary Clinton with her private server and selling access, and the lengths they've gone to frame Trump, I'm unreal. But it's the evidence is there. So I can understand people believing this sort of thing, but when it comes to sort of kidnapping, raping, and murdering young girls and boys in a liberal democracy, this sort of thing, you've got a chain of command, all manner of forms to fill out, and people covering their own backs. It just cannot exist on that scale. Yeah, it could have existed in Gaddafi's Libya, and some people would have Libya, and some people would believe it did. Excuse me. It could happen in anywhere you have one person at the top, or maybe a small group of people. But I don't really think it can happen in the caliphate either, because torture and stuff like that, but not this sort of thing. So I can understand people believing this, but if you take a closer look, now another thing point I should make out is that this sort of thing doesn't have to, there's a saying that three people can keep a secret, two of them are dead. A conspiracy isn't necessarily secret. There are open conspiracies, but conspiracies can exist in fairly big conspiracies can exist if nobody believes them or nobody in matters believes them. I'll give you an example of this from real life. If you're not from the UK, Fred West and his wife Rose, they're notorious serial killers. Among other things, they murdered their own daughter. That there's a family joke that she was buried under the patio. And when the police eventually got around to arresting West and for on suspicion of murder, they dug up the patio. They found her. So I mean, if somebody tells you your neighbour down the street has been murdering women or babies and burying them in the back garden, you might think this guy's a nutter, as he probably is. But if it comes out years later that he was actually doing this, so a conspiracy doesn't have to be, the idea that these things can only exist if they're secret is fallacious. It's as if people if the right people don't believe them, then they can. And of course, there are all sorts of things that all sorts of outrageous claims are made about all sorts of people nowadays. Don't forget we live in the age of social media. Go to YouTube especially, you'll find all sorts of ludicrous claims about, we may not have got there yet, but at some point we'll get to a stage where there is not a wealthy man, an influential man, a businessman, any man of substance or little substance, even locally, in the world who's not been accused of rape, and any woman who hasn't been accused of something. I mean, it's you have all manner of stuff on especially YouTube, videos which are professionally crafted, which you would think were produced in a studio. And a lot of these people, they join up imaginary dots all over the place. The Clinton death list is a good example of this. Odious as Hillary Clinton is, if you examine this, it falls to pieces. Another thing I'll point out is that when the authorities investigate something, some outrageous allegation, or maybe not such an outrageous one, and they conclude it was bullshit, what they do is they shred the papers to protect the innocent. And then what happened is that 10, 20 years later, somebody comes along, finds a stub on a file, and it's reignited again. But these people have no idea. Now, in the 1980s, you had the Satanic Panic. The most outrageous of these cases was Martin preschool case. I say the most outrageous. All those defendants eventually quitted, even though Ray Bucky spent 5 years behind bars, a poor bloke. Others resulted in convictions. They were absurd cases. But even then, not all nursery allegations were false. You had in 2009, you had in the UK, you had the Little Tents nursery case. This was a couple of stupid women who worked in nurseries were groomed online by paedophiles. And one of these women, the most odious, Vanessa George, has just been paroled. She hasn't been given a new identity, which could cause big problems, such as for her, with the authorities, and for anyone who decides to play vigilante. And the other woman in that case, Tracy Lyons, was paroled a couple of years ago, was given a new identity, unlike George. But female technically these women are paedophiles because they sexually, they took photos of kids. But I mean, to me, a paedophile is somebody who enjoys it. I think they would just do it because they were two stupid women who were groomed online by evil men, so I don't consider them paedophiles. The men who behind it, I think they're still in prison. They should be for a long time. but these are individual cases, and there's no network of nurseries engaged in this sort of thing. What happens when the police get involved? Is not so much with, well, not so much here, but with like care homes and boarding schools, is they get a complaint which may be true, and then they go hunting for paedophile. They go hunting for paedophile rings. They send out letters inviting people to make allegations. I covered this. I did a video, a hangout on it called, I think, trawling. Let's have a look. Trawling, and let's see how it goes live. Did one on trawling. January 11th, 2019. Trawling and weaponization. You'll find it in the Internet Archive, and also it's called Trawling and Weaponization. Full Scope Timeline, live hangout, number 10. You find it on my YouTube account and also on the Internet Archive. Now, I should point out that this is not all fiction. Indeed, the cover-up the cover-up element is not all fiction. There was a fairly notorious case here in what we got here? Yes, I'm sure it's a no. That's what I penciled him in. Anyway, there's a bloke called Charles Napier. This is quite sinister. This is the truth, and this is bad enough. Charles Napier was a paedophile teacher, and he was a bloke called Peter Wrighton, who let's have a look here. Yeah, Charles Napier was jailed at Southwark Crown Court in December 2014. He was given a 13-year sentence. Historical allegations, but he pleaded guilty. There was a bloke named Peter Wrighton, who's dead now. He was a paedophile who became involved with child protection. Some of them do. And he covered for Napier. There was a 1995 BBC documentary about it. Very good. You need a strong stomach to watch it, though. December 2014, I think, Napier, right? Yeah, December 2014. The BBC excelled themselves. That they found, I mean, after he was found unfit to work in the UK, Napier decamped to Sweden, and he was presumably teaching English. And the BBC uncovered not only letters, but actual films of him grooming underage boys. He was fairly young boys, giving them alcohol and getting to do sort of more explicit stuff. Really, really outrageous. Napier was a half brother of a Conservative MP. So these things do happen, but again, it can't happen on a massive scale. Now, back to the United States, there was a bloke named Ted Gunderson. Gunderson was an FBI agent. He was, in fact, he was simply an FBI agent, special agent. At one time, he was touted as a future. I think he interviewed as. I think he was interviewed as for the directorship of the FBI. After he left the FBI, he went into he set up his own firm, and because of antecedents, he was called on to. I mean, we started investigating investigated murders and satanic conspiracies. And so because of who he was, because he was fairly famous, he was called on by the media to comment on such things as he believed there was this massive network which was controlled by people in higher places. There's a very good lecture about him called I think it's Death of a Public Paranoid, produced by the Satanic Temple. Don't be put off by the name, right? The Satanic Temple is well, the bloke behind it, but they're based in Salem, but the bloke behind it and the Satanic Temple themselves, they produce a lot of educational material, which is very, very good about all manner of things. And the death of a public paranoid, but it's sort of an illustrated lecture. You find it on YouTube in 2 parts. I merged them together, put them on the Internet Archive. Death of a Public Paranoid, very, very good. Now, in the UK, the most recent outburst of such silliness relates to an elite VIP paedophile ring. Now, again, this is part of the idea that there are elite paedophiles, elite Satanists, and men, wealthy men and women, banksters and captains of industry, and politicians and academics. These people do exist, and they are plotting to enslave the world with the New World Order, but they're not doing any of this, believe me. The VIP paedophile ring, which culminated in one arrest only, the bloke behind, the bloke who created it, Carl Beach, who's largely responsible for its projection. He's now serving an 18-year sentence, not a day too long. He came up with this preposterous story about when he was young. He's in his 50s now, but when he was young, he was the paedophile ring was meant to have operated at Elm Guest House, and there's another one, Dolphin Court. Harvey Proctor, was an MP in the 1980s who was disgraced. There was Edward Heath and others involved. I'll just find the Harvey Proctor clip for you and play it. I'll play that. Hopefully it will sound okay to you. But you can find it on the You'll find it on the timeline anyway. Here we are. It's under the entry for August 25th, 2015. This is a short clip.
Edward Heath despised me, and he disliked my views, particularly on limiting immigration from the new Commonwealth of Pakistan, and my opposition to our entry into and continued membership of what is now known as the EU. I opposed his corporate statist views on the economy. I despised him too. He had sacked the late Enoch Powell, my political hero, from the shadow cabinet when I was chairman of the University of York Conservative Association. I regarded Enoch as an intellectual giant in comparison with Heath. The same Edward Heath, not surprisingly, would never speak to me in the House of Commons, but would snort at me as he passed me by in a Commons corridor. The feeling was entirely mutual. Now, I am accused of doing some of these dreadful things in his London house as well, a house to which I was never invited and to which Heath would never have invited me, and to which I would have declined his invitation. The same Edward Heath's home, with CCTV, housekeeper, private secretary, chauffeur, police and private detectives, all the trappings of a former Prime Minister in the security-conscious days of the IRA's assault on London. It is so far-fetched as to be unbelievable.
Yeah,
Edward Heath despised me.
Now this is much on the same theme. I may have played this clip before. This is Gabrielle Shaw of NAPAC. You'll find the entry for NAPAC at where will you find it? It's on the timeline there. Dear. May 29th, 1998. This is Gabrielle Shaw of NAPAC talking about Edward Heath to the Belfast Telegraph in August 2015. Listen to this stupid cow.
At NAPAC, we run a free and confidential telephone helpline for survivors and victims of childhood abuse. And we hear a lot of names, famous, not famous, and we keep it confidential unless there's an imminent threat to life, obviously. And Edward Heath was one of the names that we've heard quite often over the years. So no, it wasn't a surprise.
So what's the significance of him being publicly named now and this coming to light?
I think the significance is that it proves that there is no one too high. David Cameron said recently, didn't he, in the light of the historical inquiry, the Goddard inquiry, that they can go as high as they like.
No one too high and no one too gullible.
And I think this just shows the societal shift that we're seeing here. For too long, the protection of children wasn't prioritised.
These aren't children who are making these allegations. These are adults, deranged adults, attention seekers and outright liars.
It was the embarrassment factor. It was, let's protect people at the high and the mighty. But now that's changing. And the fact also that Wiltshire police are so willing to examine how they handled this back in the 90s.
And the chief constable of Wiltshire has really drunk the Kool-Aid. I mean, just unreal.
And so publicly is another really welcome change, particularly in the light of non-recent abuse. One of the things we hear from survivors and victims is, I won't be believed. This was so long ago. There's no evidence there. But it's very rare that a perpetrator will have just one victim. And with one person coming forward could encourage others.
One liar encourages a lunatic, encourages a fantasist, encourages an attention seeker. Oh, just unreal, this stupid women.
And the other thing that we see as well is, and the last couple of days, people have said, well, if this was true, then why didn't people come forward then? As if it was so simple, as if it was as simple as reporting a burglary.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you see a kid murdered in front of you, after being buggered and tortured. I mean, it's absolutely. Now, let's talk about Edward Heath. Edward Heath became, he was always a Conservative. He became leader of the Conservative Party in 1965. He became Prime Minister, ousting his great rival, Harold Wilson, and was ousted by Wilson in turn. Heath never married, right? So that can, for some people, that can mean only one thing. Only one thing. Well, I've never married. I'm 63 years old, and I'm not a faggot, and I've got the scars to prove it. I mean, Edward Heath he had three great passions in life: politics, music, and yachting. Probably in that order. He was an extremely competent musician. He did compose a bit. I wanted at least once or twice he conducted orchestras. In fact, it's a bit confusing because there was a band leader called Ted Heath, so don't get them confused. He became leader of the Conservative Party in 1965, and I think 2 years later, the Provisional IRA was formed. So it was always, the Conservatives have always been a target for the IRA. Now, homosexuality was not legalised in the UK until the so-called Wolfenden reforms in 1967. So in 1965, if there'd been any serious evidence, any serious talk about him being a homo, he would never have got near the leadership. We would never become prime minister. Never. Now, interestingly, the first, probably not the first allegation, but I undoubtedly whispers like this, but the first really public allegation against Heath was not of homosexuality, but something entirely different. In 1984, a man named Kevin Kenneth O'Dowd, a serial rapist, stood trial. He was accused of raping Mrs. X. And she testified against him, and he produced some forged documents, made all sorts of scurrilous allegations. One was called the Fair. Well, there was actually something called the Fairweather Report. This was named after Superintendent Fairweather of Thames Valley Police, who committed suicide in December 1981. But he claimed there were photographs of that she'd been having off with Heath, and there was all sorts of scurrilous allegations, and it's all bullshit. O'Dowd was tried again for rape in 2007 and was given a life sentence, but 2 years later this was quashed for technical reasons, regrettably, by the Court of Appeal. So this is the sort of rubbish that was the sort of rubbish people who are peddling rubbish about the high and mighty. Now, Heath, he had Operation Midland. Heath was meant to be part of this VRP pedophile ring, which was said to have operated at Elm Guest House. Now, Elm Guest House did exist. I've got the list there. Yeah, I've got the list. The Elm Guest. Now, Elm Guest House was it was run in South London, Southwest London. I'm in Southeast London, Southwest London. It was based in Southwest London. It was run by Carol Kazir and her husband Haroon, who was always some sort of Asian. It advertised in at least one homosexual publication. It appears that many of its clientele were homosexuals. Now, this was 1979, 82, or a bit later than that. It was 1979 to 82. Now, homosexuality was still legal then. Was legal. It was legal then, but it was still a kiss of death for politics, for a mainstream politician. In 1982, it was raided, and this resulted in a young boy being taken into care who was being neglected. There was no suggestion of sexual abuse. Carol Kazir died in 1990. She was 47 and diabetic. Her death was all suicide, apparently because she neglected to take her insulin. And of course, there was speculation that she was murdered. Now, in 2012, the Elm Guest House list appeared on the internet. Now, this is a remarkable document. It's a list of names said to have been put together by Cassia shortly before her death. At the top is Leon Britton, the Home Secretary and Monday Club. Cyril Smith MP, who may well have been a paedophile. Ron Brown MP. Harvey Proctor MP. Colin Jordan, listed as leader of the National Front, and others. Dr. Ray Wire, who was he worked with paedophiles, and there's an all right-wing name, then Cliff Richard. Now, the only thing that this document lacks is an official stamp. It's amazing that people will disagree with things people say. Then you adduce a document, and look, it's documented. No. The guest house list was put together by former social worker Chris Fay, and it's rubbish. And I'll tell you why it's rubbish. I'll say at the top, Leon Britton. Well, Leon Britton was a Jew, and that because of that, you have it attracts the lunatic fringe. Colin Jordan, he says, leader of the NF. No, Colin Jordan was never a leader of the National Front. He was never a member of the National Front. Colin Jordan was an avowed Nazi, proud of it. He was Britain's leading National Socialist theorist from the death of his mentor Arnold Leese in January 1956 to his own death in 2009. He was a man who was passionately anti-Jewish, not violently, but passionately. And the idea that he would have engaged in sodomizing underage boys with the Jewish Home Secretary is just absolutely beyond belief. Not only that, you'll find correspondence with Jordan on my main website, unrelated to this sort of nonsense. He was from certainly from at least the early 1980s, if not before. He was living in Harrogate, near Harrogate, a house called Thorgarth. And he rarely, if ever, came to London. Cliff Richard's name was Jess Conrad has been put on there. Well, Cliff Richard's name has been put on there out of malice because, like I say again, Cliff Richard never married, and for some people that can only be one reason. Though, if you look back through his history, certainly, he became a born again Christian. The reality is that as you get older, men and women generally become less interested in sex. I mean, it becomes they have other things besides getting their end away, and especially as you get older, you haven't got so much time. Now, interestingly, this nonsense was championed by the MP Tom Watson, who really attacked Leon Britton. A century earlier, in the deep south, another MP named Tom Watson, and another politician named Tom Watson, was a leading. If you look up the murder of Mary Fagan was murdered by Leo Frank. Don't let anyone tell you it was Jim Connolly. Leo Frank murdered Mary Fagan. But this Tom Watson is a total conspiracy crank. The idea that Edward Heath and the other thing about Cliff Richard, if you look at his touring schedule, and it's just they just make this stuff up, and because it's backdated, it's difficult, if impossible, to refute. Now, I suspect there are other reasons for Leon Britton being accused. He was Home Secretary at the time the paedophile information exchange reared its ugly head. This was a group of utterly depraved individuals who campaigned to abolish the age of or lower the age of consent. But other people do. Peter Tatchell wanted the age of consent lowered to 14. I don't know what now, but if you know something about historically, there was no age excuse me. Historically, there was no age of consent. The Islamophobes love this when they attack the Prophet Muhammad for marrying a 9-year-old. Historically, there was no age of consent. In England, it was set, the age of consent was set at 12 by the Statute of Westminster, 1275. It was raised to 13, but it was 13 in the 1870s, and it was raised to 16 in 1885 after a moral panic created by W.T. Stead. So the strict libertarian position, one which Chris Tame adhered to, was that there should be no age of consent, but that if a child felt he or she was old enough to have sex, that child should be able to petition a private court. It was just complete nonsense. The paedophile information exchange, it was run by a bloke named Tom O'Carroll, and there were calls for the government to ban it. It affiliated to the National Council for Civil Liberties, or whatever it was called then. Now, this is a part of a video which was uploaded to UK by BBC. It's part of a Newsnight programme. It's uploaded in 2014, and much as I hate to do it, I'm going to have to defend Harriet Harman here.
Over recent days, the Daily Mail has splashed its front pages with allegations about the Labour deputy leader, her husband, Shadow Minister Jack Dromey, and the former Labour Health Secretary, Patricia Hewitt. All three worked for the National Council for Civil Liberties in the 1970s and 80s. The Mail says the council, now known as the human rights organisation Liberty, was closely linked to the paedophile information exchange.
Closely linked is weasel words. What does that mean, you know? What does it mean, closely linked? I'm closely linked to Heathrow Airport. I live, 20 miles away. I'm close. There was a murder down my road, literally. Well, not a murder. It was some guy who was, I think, 25. It's a rather bizarre case. He shot at somebody. He had a shotgun. He tried to shoot somebody, but pellets bounced off of Carl Winstone and killed him. Really bizarre case. But you'll find it. You'll find it in the news under Google News. Venner Road. Look it up. I'm closely linked to that. There was another murder down my road, literally 10, 12 so years ago. So I'm closely linked. What does it mean? Doesn't mean anything. Linked.
A group which campaigned for paedophiles' rights. It's claimed it even argued to lower the age of consent to 10.
It did lower that. It wasn't lower the age of consent. Below that, paedophiles have rights. Shocking, isn't it? Yeah. As long as they're not actually interfering with kids. Or downloading child porn, they've got rights like the rest of us. Obviously, we don't want to work in nurseries.
Ms. Harman became the legal officer at the NCCL in 1978, and her name appears on documents submitted to the Home Office that argued that pictures of naked children should not be banned as indecent unless it could be proved that the child had been harmed. But today...
Now, this sounds terribly sinister, but if you look up the Julia Somerville affair, that shows you how ridiculous this innuendo is. Julia Somerville, she's still around. I don't know what she's doing now. She's a newscaster. She and her lover, she wasn't married to much. They took photographs of the young daughter in the bath, and I think it was a bubble bath. They drew tits on her with bubbles, and in those days, cameras were. I mean, if you had a film, you took it to the chemist. They took this to the chemist to be developed, and next thing you know, she's been arrested for child porn. It's absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you can find naked. I mean, they used to probably still do use naked babies to advertise toilet tissue. So this sort of innuendo is, your family album of kids semi-naked or even naked babies is not pornography. Period. But this is the sort of nonsense we hear from the BBC. Amazingly, the BBC. After this, they went on to cover to do a great expose of this ludicrous VIP paedophile ring, which the police weren't bothered with, because they wanted to believe this rubbish, and they were flying all over the place and staying at hotels, and you know, and it's easier looking for imaginary paedophiles than chasing real criminals who might have guns and shoot back.
Ms Harman's boss, the Labour leader, Ed Miliband, came to her defence.
Harriet Harman is somebody of huge decency and integrity. I've known her for 20 years. I don't set any store by these allegations. I know she has a long and proud record of being on the right side of all of these issues.
Well, I disagree with all that, but the idea that Harriet Harman is illegal paedophiles is too ludicrous to you know.
Frankly, that is absolutely clear.
But now, after days of demands from the Mail and other newspapers for Hewitt, Dromey and Harman to provide answers, the Labour deputy leader has decided to break her silence.
So our chief correspondent spoke exclusively to Harriet Harman earlier this evening.
Harriet Harman, are you speaking out now because the Daily Mail has made it impossible for you to keep quiet?
Yes, that is the case. I mean, they've made these allegations before, and they're so outlandish and so far from the truth that in the past I thought, don't dignify them with a response. You know, people won't believe them, they'll just go away. And I thought the same this time, but they've put it on their front page 3 times, and they're whipping up such an ugly insinuation that I felt it was really important to respond to them. But
I've got to agree with that. It's, you know, it's ridiculous.
You were the legal officer for several years at the National Council for Civil Liberties, which was affiliated to the paedophile.
No, she's lies. NCCL was not affiliated to the Paedophile Information Exchange. Paedophile Information Exchange is affiliated with them, and why shouldn't they? Yeah.
Information Exchange. Were you aware of the affiliation?
basically, NCCL was an organisation which had something like 6,000 members and 1,000 affiliates, and anybody could join the NCCL simply by paying a fee. When I was there as NCCL legal officer, there was nothing that, far from it, that I put forward that supported sexual abuse of children.
But why was it acceptable even to have an affiliation?
It's just this innuendo. Why is it acceptable for you to interview paedophiles and on occasion convicted murderers? Why are these links? Why are they acceptable? It's bullshit.
They didn't try to hide what they were. The title of the group was the Paedophile Information Exchange. Why was it okay for them even to have any link with the group you work for?
Well,
now this is the great thing. See, there were calls to ban it, and Leon Britton refused to ban, as Home Secretary, refused to ban it. Now this was very sensible because it allowed them to operate in the open, and eventually they overstepped the mark, and a lot of them ended up in jail. Certainly, Carol did. The specific allegation against Britain with the BRP paedophilia is related to that, and I think not just the Guest House list, but also the Dickens dossier. Now, the late Geoffrey Dickens, put together a dossier of allegations of people in high places who've been involved in this sort of networks, and the dossier is said to have gone missing. It may well have been thrown away because not because of anything sinister, but because it's such absolute rubbish. And say he was Britain was Home Secretary at the time. Now, the other thing was in 1983, I think there was something called the Brighton Beast case, which where are we? Yeah, well, there was actually a different Brighton Beast in 1838. This was some woman who claimed to have seen a panther or something in her garden. But the Brighton Beast case, that was I think it was about 1982, 83. Let's have a look. Yeah, 1983. I believe this was. I think it was a genuine attack. A 6-year-old boy was snatched off the street in Brighton by 3 men in a car, sexually assaulted and dumped. I think this was. I don't think this was a case of a kid making it up. I think it actually happened. no one was ever brought to book over it anyway. And Britain was, I think he was Home Secretary at the time or shortly before that. And I think this has all been lumped in. And one of the rumours I heard about Britain is that, well, there's a couple of rumours. One you might find a video of this, of a customs officer who claimed that when Britain was a European an MEP, that he stopped him with a video of child porn coming through and his car, and was told to let him go, or maybe it was confiscated. The other one was that Britain was arrested for soliciting a public toilet, and he made a phone call and was released. Same allegation has been made against Tony Blair. He was said to have been, before he became Prime Minister, said to have been arrested for importuning a public toilet or something, and gave the name Charles Linton. These stories, Blair's son, his eldest son, when he was celebrating his exam results, he was arrested, was picked up in Leicester Square drunk, because he was underage. It shouldn't have been released, but some pig released his name sold his name to the press, and that came out. So they can't keep secrets like that. Even in this country, the director of public prosecutions was arrested for curb crawling, trying to pick up prostitutes. So this great they do protect each other for financial conspiracies and that, and what's going on in the United States at the moment with these networks. But the idea that these great paedophile networks like this is complete bullshit. I should mention in this connection Sir Peter Herman, who was a member of the Paedophile Information Exchange. Sir Peter Heyman, rather. He was said to have attended Elm Guest House. In October 1978, he left a package on a London bus, which was said to have contained paedophile-related writings, sexual fantasies. In 1984, he was convicted of an act of gross indecency and fined with cottaging. One newspaper claimed he'd been sent to jail, but he wasn't. Rather interesting is that I think whether or not Sir Peter Heyman was a paedophile, he may have been a plant. And anyway, so the Paedophile Information Exchange ended up collapsing. And I think we should give the authorities a bit more credit. So, I mean, all this nonsense that dates back to the 1980s, and before that. I've no doubt that allegations were made about Ted Heath back in the 1960s. I mean, scurrilous gossip, rumours by political opponents, by just. I mean, there was no social media in those days, but there were still malicious people. And then a few words about the Epstein case. There's been no mention of that in the past couple of weeks. But clearly there was something going on there. Virginia Roberts, the latest. This woman, Virginia Roberts, or Virginia Guffey, whatever her name is, she claims to have had sex with Prince Andrew. She's made all manner of allegations. I mean, she was a procurer of young girls for perverts, or for this pervert in particular. Did Epstein, was he controlled by the security services? I mean, there was something big going on here, but Virginia Roberts Guffey was well rewarded for her services. I've done a video about her, the prince and the whore. There's all sorts of allegations about it coming up. There were underage teens. It was established there were underage teens who were paid well for their services, and 2 or 3 have claimed Epstein actually raped them. If this happened, it's bad enough. It's probably as bad as it got. There have been allegations that in the UK that there was the Kincora Boys Home scandal, which was said to have been controlled by the security services and which were used to ensnare powerful politicians and the like. And a bloke named Richard Kerr turned up during the paedophile ring hysteria in 2015, and he claimed to have been at Kincora. Somebody did some research that said he was too young to have been there. And there were actually convictions relating from the Kincora Boys Home case. Wealthy people will abuse their authority, but as I say, the idea that there are vast networks of paedophiles out there controlled by the government. I mean, there are individual paedophile rings do exist, but the idea that you have a worldwide net of them, that they're controlled by powerful politicians, and that the FBI and the CIA are all part of it, and the security service in this country, it's absolute bunk. This is fantasy. The real crimes that happen are shocking enough. Anyway, that is the grand conspiracy. I mean, you have to, if you do the research, you'll find a lot of it there. Bear in mind that we've got another person. not long left, but as I say, this will go onto my YouTube account. Well, after it's finished, it will be made private, and I'll edit out the superfluous stuff at the beginning and put it on my YouTube account, and also on next month on the Internet Archive. We've been discussing the grand conspiracy. Oh no, the president's gone again. The real truth is bad enough without this nonsense. As I said, genuine victims do, as I said before, genuine victims do embellish. And this Victoria Guthrie creature is hammering it for all it's worth. I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day if she's charged with something herself, either with if she goes under oath with perjury, or maybe I think she should be charged with procuring, actually. She's admitted as such. She's claimed that she because of her age, she said she was 16, but 16-year-olds can be convicted of murder, so why not have procuring underage girls for sex trafficking? Anyway, that's the latest Hangout finished. Thank you for coming, Sonia White. I will. I'm working on the full slope timelines. Haven't added anything the past few days. Hopefully, very soon it will be on its own domain. Sort of technical problems here, but I also have to rewrite the introductory, do a new introductory page for it. Well, I don't have to, but I'm adding stuff relating to sort of technical stuff about archive websites and material and various editions of newspapers. Well, thank you for coming, and I will be put together another live stream maybe in 2 or 3 weeks' time, probably on Thursday night.